Right, this is my review of a Zephyros 1 Wild Country tent made by Terra Nova. These are the specifications. It's just less than 3.5 pounds in weight, and it's 3-season backpacking, which is a very curious rating because autumn can be like winter in this country, so that's your first warning about this tent. They've gave it a 3-season backpacking so that if it fails you and you've used it in winter, that's one way that you'll not get your money back. Now what I'm going to be concentrating on in this video is the WC Superflex alloy poles. They've described them as being 8.5mm wide. Now just so you know, that is not as wide as my little finger nail. Now that's your first warning. A pole that thin is not good enough. Now I'll just show you the Zephyros 1 tent partly put up in my bedroom. You do not need to erect this tent in your garden to see how ineffectual it is. So I'm just panning up. So that's the wreckage of my bedroom and the tent in the middle. You've got the inner tent laid out in front of you. I'm not somebody who can afford to buy tents. This cost me £80. This tent normally retails at £109, so I've got it £30 cheaper. I wouldn't keep it if it only cost £20. This is a very, very poor tent. Now many people have wrote about the inner, and I recommend you check other videos on YouTube in how this tent is erected. The main problem with the inner tent is it hooks up and is maintained by the fly sheet, so you tie it to the inside of the fly sheet on the seam. That's always a bad design. No matter how strong the fly sheet is, you're testing the strength of this tent doing that. But the fly sheet is the one good thing about the tent. It's 4000mm waterproof, which is a very good waterproof rating. I've got another tent, a Carrymore X Lite 2, which has that degree rating for waterproofness, and it's still waterproof. Now I am going to show you the poles in close up in my dimly lit bedroom, which I don't think you can see. So that's the pole. It's very thin. It's described as Superflex alloy. But this pole is exactly the same as these poles, which I think are being described as anodized aluminium. There are 4 different descriptions of these poles: anodized aluminium, Superflex alloy, 7001 T6 alloy poles, and aviation aluminium. All these different descriptions are of the same poles, and there are 4 manufacturers: Berghaus, Carrymore, Terra Nova and Nature Hike, 3 of which I think are British, and the last one, Nature Hike, is Chinese. But they all use this kind of pole. This kind of pole is too weak for a tent. Let me show you why. If I can find the troubling section. This is where my tent pole split. If I get it on camera, which I can't. So there you are. And it split there, if you can see it. I'll put it under the light. Now that is a split metal, and it looks more like torn paper. That's because it's only, I'll get you a better section, it's only 1 millimetre thick. Now look at the ferrule, or the bit which fits inside the sleeve. That's a smaller circumference, looks slightly thicker whether it is or not, but it will be stronger for it being a smaller diameter. Now the problem with any bendy pole tent is this: you have to bend the pole, and when you want to break any kind of pole or stick, you start off by bending it. So by bending it, you are starting and initiating the process of breaking it. Now, using those poles in my Carrymore X-Lite tool, in my well-sheltered garden, the poles snapped just from being in that position. There were windless conditions, and the reason it snapped is because you can have the strongest poles, the strongest metal. These poles will be made out of the strongest metal, but because, let me just get this blinding section again, but because, but because you've got one piece of metal which is thicker and stronger slot into another piece of metal, as long as of the same metal, a thicker piece of metal of the same metal is going to cause a thinner piece of metal of the same metal to split. Now the problem with the Zephyros one is while it's got a very strong fly sheet, and that holds the pole, helps hold the strength of the pole. It's an extra layer and extra thickness, and it stops the pole bending outwards a little bit. But this Zephyros, the sleeve comes to rest on a joint, so it's unprotected on the joint. So that bit's exposed to the elements, which means slightly different temperatures. It means when the sleeves are wet, the poles aren't going to be as well supported as when they're dry, or vice versa. But it means different pressures. Now in one day in the British summertime or the winter, you can get every kind of weather going. I've known severe winter conditions as early as October. In around about November 5th, I had a Gellert mongoose tent, and that froze rock solid. And so that's still in autumn. Winter doesn't start well December 21st. So that's like 1.5 months before winter starts. So you pitch your tent in autumn, and this is a 3-season tent, that should be able to stand up to autumn. It won't. Now the absolute crime, or the insult to injury of this tent, is these poles. These are fiberglass poles. They're upright poles. Now, fiberglass has been used in bendy pole tents because of its bendiness. And this is an upright section about 17 inches long. Doesn't need to bend. So why not have a strong, thicker metal, which wouldn't have added much weight to this tent anyway, rather than fiberglass? And when fiberglass breaks, it splinters, which means it's going to punch a hole through the fly sheet of your tent. Now, much has been, now even the most positive reviews of this tent, and don't go on reviews of this tent as your guide to buying it, because you'll notice that no tent ever really gets advertised on television. That's because the company would be directly responsible for any claims that this tent wasn't up to snuff. All of the advertising for this tent that I've come across has been on the internet by parties who are not the manufacturers or retailers of this tent. There are some retailers, but it's mostly people like you and me. Now, there's lots of positive reviews for this tent. There's about 73 on site, and most of those 73 reviews are positive. On Amazon's site, there's about 23 reviews, most of which are positive, only a handful of which reflect my experience and of tents with these kinds of poles. And so I looked more closely at the reviews. Most of the reviews are by people who've only put the tent up and pitched it in the garden. So they put it up and given it 5 stars. A lot of reviews just give a star rating and no comments. But at least a couple of reviews say the poles are too thin, they snap easily. And then you've got 1 or 2 people saying they've had a Zephyros one for years and they swear by it and all that. They used it in all kinds of conditions. Based on the way these poles are, that's impossible because of how they're split. That's what you need to look at. So these are supposed to be 8.5mm thick. And then as again, look at the ends. Look at oh that's the wrong section again. So if you look at the section again I showed you earlier, so that is 1mm thick. That's my thumbnail for comparison. Don't buy it when you buy any tent. I've seen these poles in a Berghaus 3.1 tent, and the Nature Hike tent, and a Carrymore X-Lite. There are 4 or 5 companies selling tents with these poles, and there are 4 different descriptions of what these poles are. That alone should make you suspicious. And again, no tents seem to get advertised on television. This reputation of a T6 alloy pole exists only on the internet. There's no mention how great they are. Don't buy a tent with these poles. I'd have almost kept this tent, but the fiberglass poles were really, maybe to like, if you wrapped the poles in gaffer tape, add an extra layer of reinforcement for the poles. But then gaffer tape, I think it's fabric or some kind of, so you have fabric rubbing against fabric inside the sleeve, and that could cause rapid wear and tear on the tent, so I don't know the effect. I've thought about keeping this tent and getting thicker poles, but the thicker poles might be too strong for the sleeve to maintain. Plus it seems to be an expensive affair. So that's my review of the Zephyros 1 tent. I highly recommend you avoid, and there seems to be an emergence of trekking pole supported tents, which is really a backward step to upright pole tents and ridge pole tents. But move towards those. Failing that, just get yourself material like this from some kind of outlet which might sell them, and a couple of trekking poles and a builder's tarpaulin, and make your own tent, because this is an expensive folly. You do not want to caught out in the middle of the countryside with a broken tent. Okay, this is same power, and it's over and out. This is same power, and I've finished this review. Bye.